bottom line. I have proven this over and over again. The signal is there everywhere. People are not being haunted. People are not talking to God. People are not ascending. This is affecting everyone, just like any illness. To the degree depends on the individual. The mental health industry is a fraud and a cover for this, and you can't give me one fact to disprove any of this, period.
This man is seriously the...
We have to leave it there.
Look out for Charlie.
Many years ago, I did a lot of research into what people were referring to as Morgellons. And I'm not talking reading about it, I'm talking like hands-on experiments with this. And in doing these experiments, I figured out what it consisted of, what it reacted to, what actually killed it, and where it actually was. I found that it was pretty much everywhere, living dormant outside of people, plants, and animals. It was everywhere in the environment, in the form of what looked like dust or film or fibers. As this is a multi-pronged system, I even found evidence showing that this was coming down from above. I found it on the sides of houses, and you could see that it wasn't underneath the windowsills, as though it had fallen down like spray paint. It was, in fact, existing outside of people. You could find it on money, in vehicles, and in household dust. I made videos about that detailed about half of my research. I kept some of it off the streets, so to speak, and this was for different valid reasons. And I eventually released, a lot of the information on a protocol that would attack this from the outside and the inside. It was grossly oversimplified by people out there. People still come to this channel and state ridiculous third-hand information like, use lots of borax, which is just one tiny piece of the puzzle. So, the oversimplification seems more like a disinformation campaign. I made the details perfectly clear, so it was very, very hard to misunderstand. Those videos are still out there. But after 2020, I stopped talking about this so much because the medical establishment had performed a full-on coup d'etat on all of the internet, but heavily on YouTube. And I had other things to talk about. I didn't want my channel taken totally out. So I just began focusing on other subjects that I talk about in my videos more. I received a lot of flack and bullshit for my talking about Morgellons. The conclusions that I came up with were met with absolute violent opposition. The claims that I made were made to sound totally science fiction, like Star Trek science fiction, ridiculous. And they weren't. I'm going by the evidence, not what I want it to be. It was very strange for these people to start coming out of the woodwork and claiming that everything that I was saying was like space age crazy. And again, during my research, I've released a lot of videos proving that this exists outside the body. The system will always confuse and use brand confusion to throw people off the path of putting something together. Like fungus. Let's name a few conditions. White nose syndrome in bats. Chronic wasting disease in deer. Eczema in human beings. Candida infections in human beings. Ringworm in human beings. That's all brand confusion because this is all fungus. And these are just a couple of the examples out of thousands out there. It's all brand confusion. And each one is, nothing but fungus. Most of these ailments and diseases are fungus. A new term is created and used to intentionally create brand confusion. So the average person doesn't put it together, the fact that all these conditions that have either came into existence recently or grown in record numbers recently are all fungus. When I came out and said that it was living outside the body in household dust, in other areas, in cars, and outside, in your garage, people tried to say that that was ridiculous. However, the medical establishment has recently come forward and blamed fungal infections and other things like this on the fact that they are, quote-unquote, colonizing on random objects. Like, I'm going to show you this article right here. In this article, they state that they were hanging out on hospital equipment. Let me show you this real quick. Here, they're talking about Candida, and what they're using is brand confusion. This is fungus, and they are trying to confuse you intentionally. It says that CDC researchers also found that the Candida is colonizing onto bed rails and other parts of the hospital environment, right? Very strange. So they're admitting that it is colonizing outside the human body, not needing the heat and the moisture to exist, but colonizing on things, right? They're also saying, we think that skin colonization involves biofilm growth. Now, when I talked about the biofilm that this was using a while back, people came out in droves, to say how ridiculous it was that I was talking about this. Now, mainstream science is basically backing up everything that I have talked about. And I'm talking everything. And this is their trick. A little information with a lot of disinformation. Then using the hospital as an example to keep people from thinking about what is in their home or on their car or in their garage or in their workplace or simply outside. So, they basically admit the truth. I was right, but then they make it seem like something else entirely, something else that only exists in hospitals. Like, it's colonizing on hospital equipment. You don't think it's colonizing on the keyboard at the gas station when you type in your PIN? You don't think it's colonizing there. It's only colonizing in the hospital. This is why they keep hospitals like 40 degrees when you go in there now. It's freezing. Hospitals weren't like that before. It's deceptive and a lie, plain and simple. They're admitting all of this a decade later, 10 years later. I showed microscope videos of blue fibers. Blue fibers, red and pink fibers, black fibers, clear fibers with what looks like blood within the clear fibers. And people try to explain that away many times. Even one operator claiming that fungus doesn't grow blue, right? Well, right here, I'm going to show you that it sure the hell does. Here is fungus under a microscope, a small piece, and if you notice, it looks like branches growing, like a plant or a tree. And it is very, very blue. It is a blue fungus, which would, one piece of that, they would say that was something that came off your clothing, right? If it was bigger. It does grow blue. And these people were just trying to disinform people left and right back then. But the kicker came when someone left a post under one of my videos on another platform the other day, maybe a week ago, and they left a government link and stated that the government recognizes that Morgellons exists now, right? And I only read a few sentences of it before I couldn't take anymore, and I closed it out. But someone that I talked to on the regular decided to check the link and keep reading, which is exactly what I should have done. But I've totally run out of patience for bullshit over the past few years, and I really do have a hard time with it. And that's because I've spent my entire life listening to and reading the lies and the narratives of the establishment, like a lifetime of school, living amongst them, dealing with it in pop culture, on television, on the radio, socializing with people who are indoctrinated with the bullshit, and I just won't give any more of my time to it. But I should have. I should have kept reading, and that was my fault. Because what it says in this mainstream article is what I have been saying for a decade. It's just a watered-down version of Look Out for Charlie. It really is, and it's meant to quell the suspicion of the average person who may have ran into some information and be sitting on the fence. It's designed to knock that person back over to the other side of the fence. And this type of thing isn't new. This has happened over and over since I started making videos. So they will start coming at you and putting out disinformation and basically combating it. I've spent a lot of time talking about this infection and what it does to people, how it operates, how it reacts to RF, ELF, and EF, how it turns itself into what I called at the time a dirty board, how it turns itself into a battery and turns people into basically a battery. And people were fighting this information with absolute hatred, telling me that I was talking science fiction and how I must be taking drugs, stop taking meth, man. Crazy shit, ridiculous statements that were designed to not attack me personally, but an attempt to make anybody watching the video take pause if they were to read the comments. Typical manipulation, typical tricks. But now let's take a look at what the government is telling people about Morgellons in 2024. It was the article that I should have read. Now I'm going to kind of read this in shorthand. I'm not going to read it exactly how it's written out. And I'm going to call it out as I go, because I do not want anybody to accidentally read this and mistake what I am saying for misinformation. So, it basically says here that Morgellons disease is characterized by multicolored fibers that lie under, are embedded in, or project from the skin. And that's partially true. It actually lies within the biofilm of the body. When you get the biofilm off the skin, the real skin underneath is very raw, like if you skin yourself, skin your knee, and it is very sensitive, but it usually doesn't have anything in it. It is usually in the biofilm, and people believe that the biofilm is their skin, and it usually isn't. It says that it was initially considered to be a delusional disorder. Strange, because when you search Google for it, it still comes up as a delusional disorder. But that's not the case anymore. Apparently they are admitting that it exists. So, here is a bunch of information going on and on and on, but there are very key points to this. Then they go on to say that it comes from a tick-borne illness. That is bullshit. There are many people that have never even been around ticks and start to come down with this. And they blame this on bed bugs and all sorts of things. This is a typical trick. It is not a tick-borne illness, and neither is Lyme and this other stuff now. It has turned into an infectious disease. And it will get on you if you are in close proximity to people for a long time. You will eventually get it. It's like Russian roulette. You can be around somebody for 5 minutes who has it and not get it, or touch them or shake their hand. But if you're around this person or living with them for 6 months or so, or whatever, you're eventually going to get it. It's Russian roulette. It says here that 98% of Morgellons disease subjects had a tick-borne disease diagnosis, confirming the clinical association between Morgellons disease and other infections. Now, I need to remind you where this came from. This came from the National Library of Medicine. So it says that studies on Morgellons disease tissue showed that the filaments are not textile fibers. They are biofilaments of human cellular origin. Very strange. I've picked up lots of strange things that came down from above in the past. Now this is interesting. They say that the blue coloration of some of the fibers, was first determined to be the result of melanin pigmentation, as shown by staining, right? And then an independent study concurred that the embedded blue fibers in the Morgellons specimen were not textile fibers. So they are giving you information and then saying, well, some of them are hairs. This is what TV shows do with subjects when they cover a subject, that's controversial, and at the end they bring on some expert that totally tries to debunk it, and then they leave you with that. This is kind of what this is doing through the whole thing. But they admit a lot of key stuff. Here it says that fungus has been repeatedly detected in Morgellons skin and tissue samples, and that initial studies confirmed the presence of fungus. Of course, it's always in the lesions. When you form one of these small lesions, it immediately starts itching, and it starts off really small. It looks like a bug bite that you've scratched at too much, right? And if you take like a jeweler's loop or a magnifier to it and look, there's always a fiber in the sore, almost like the fiber was acid and ate through your skin. And as soon as you use something like like lime sulfur, diluted lime sulfur on a rag or a paper towel, and get that fiber out of there, keep rubbing until that fiber comes out, it will heal up. If the fiber is left in there, it will keep spreading and spreading, and the sore will get bigger and bigger. So they're admitting this, But then they are going back and trying to cover it with different things, tick-borne illness, this and that. Here is where they are saying that they are finding, I'm going to keep it very simple for people, they are finding bacteria. So just before they found fungus, now they're saying that they're finding bacteria in it. So fungus and bacteria, this is everything that I talked about 10 years ago. Everything that I talked about, and they're now admitting it. You're not crazy. It's true, but it's a tick-borne illness, related to Lyme or whatever. It's all the same thing. These are different symptoms of the same issue. And, someone who has it may, and has symptoms of having it, most people don't even have symptoms. They might not have fibers or Morgellons type symptoms. Maybe they have Lyme symptoms. Maybe they have fibromyalgia symptoms. Maybe they have chronic fatigue. It's all coming from the same thing. Now, this is funny because I have said this and people have fought me on it. And here, they actually compare Lyme disease to Morgellons. And we see many Morgellons patients who are diagnosed with other conditions, or mental illness. Isn't that funny? And thus, we are not testing for Lyme disease, although Morgellons disease is usually associated with chronic symptoms of Lyme disease. This is everything that I said before, and everybody was all up in arms about it. And now the National Library of Medicine is coming out and saying the same thing. It's like a very dry Look Out for Charlie video. Now, this is interesting. It says Morgellons disease may result from an infectious process. There may be a psychiatric component as well. What do you know? It says that Morgellons patients exhibit neuropsychiatric symptoms. They're admitting it. So in a study of 25 Morgellons patients, 23 had prior psychiatric diagnosis, like bipolar disorder, because they had Morgellons. It wasn't the other way around. They had Morgellons before they had the overt symptoms. Come on, man. This is because the mind doesn't get ill, like your brain has a cold. It is ridiculous. And it says because Morgellons patients may show neuropsychiatric symptoms, that's why healthcare workers considered Morgellons to be a delusional disorder. Isn't this fucking great? This gives them absolute and total plausible deniability for everything that they ever did to cover this up. And now they're admitting it. They have been covering this up for 24 years. Over 24 years. But actively doing it for 24 years. Calling people crazy, and now they're admitting it. That's insane. If anybody lets these people get away with this, this is nuts. And what did I tell people about, Lyme disease and Morgellons? I said that it causes all of this, and now they're saying that it causes paranoia, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, delusions, sensory hallucinations, major depression, and mania. Right? And now they're looping and wrapping up Lyme disease with Morgellons disease, just like I said it before. Here they call Morgellons disease a Lyme-like illness associated with spontaneously appearing, slowly healing fibers and skin lesions from the National Library of Medicine. Now, here's the kicker. I'm going to show you the kicker. Because when I brought this up, when I brought up Morgellons turning people into a battery, turning people into an antenna, right? People were violently against it, explaining, trying to say that I was talking Star Trek, that I was talking crazy, that I was smoking meth, any insult that they could come up with, they were attacking me with. Now, check this out. It says here that in these cases, the false belief of parasitic infection is not genuinely delusional. Not genuinely delusional, because patients are in fact misinterpreting symptoms caused by the production of human biofibers. Listen to what they're telling you, that it is not delusion. And I talked about being sensitive to power, 60 hertz power, to radio waves, to RF, to ELF, everything. Now, this is what they say now, not me. This is them 10 years after I said it. They say, furthermore, we find that electrostatic energy and mechanical energy can cause, when they say mechanical energy, they're talking about sound, can cause movement of the filaments interpreted by some patients as the movement of a living organism. They just admitted it. I'm going to say that again. We find that electrostatic energy and mechanical energy can cause movement of the filaments. They are admitting exactly what I talked about 10 years ago now. Now they're admitting it a decade later. As far as medicine goes, that may as well be 1,000 years. 10 years. And they are admitting something that I was talking about 10 years ago, and people were calling me fucking crazy about it. So think about that. Everything that I've talked about, every single thing on this channel, has turned out to be true. There is not one thing that I talked about that turned out to be bunk or bullshit. Not one thing. So when I talk about this stuff, I'm telling you, I've done the experiments, and it just blows my mind that these people are doing this in-your-face cover-up 10 years later. We find that electrostatic energy and mechanical energy, that is very deceptive there because it's vague. Mechanical energy. You know, what average person knows what mechanical energy is? You know, can cause movement of the filaments. Yeah, it does a lot more than that. It reacts to them. They're telling you that these are antennas and that they do things when they are in the proximity of certain energy. When they say electrostatic energy, you're talking RF, EF, ELF. And when you're talking mechanical energy, you're talking vibration and sound. Right? So, is anybody not getting this now? Everything that I have talked about, they are now coming out and admitting it. Everything. There's a lot more to this, but I'm going to stop here because that is the big point. They are literally admitting that these fibers are a dirty board. Exactly what I called it. I called it a dirty board, meaning a haphazard circuit board. And that's exactly what they are. They're admitting that that's what they are. And that's it for now. Look out for Charlie.
Then you see these bands of very distinct cloud cover moving into the region. That is not rain, that is not snow. Believe it or not, military aircraft flying through the region is dropping chaff. Small bits of aluminum, sometimes it's made of plastic or even metallicized paper products, but it's used as an anti-radar. Now, they won't confirm that, but I was in the Marine Corps for many years, and I'll tell you right now, that's what it is.
Look out for Charlie.